So, welcome to Matchathon 2020. And a part of Matchathon, we are organizing webinars, which is more of an informational and a learning session for all the participants, right? So, the whole idea is we are focusing on technology and anything to do with technology. And, when people think of technology, SDGs is not something that comes to their mind. Focus a lot on that today. We decided, all right, so let's invite people from the field, who actually specialize in this. So we just thought, all right, the best person, obviously, we could think of are like two people who have been in the field of SDGs, especially with technology. So that's Aashish, who's the co-founder and CEO of MASH Project Foundation, and Raj Janagam, CEO of AIC-IIITH Foundation. So two of the best minds here to talk about, using technology as a catalyst to achieve SDGs. So to talk about Ashish, again, he's a co-founder and CEO of MASH Project Foundation, a global change maker, the official Indian delegate for BRICS Youth. He's been part of the summit in Guwahati for the UNESCO Youth Forum and the International Youth Forum. And he's also a member of the World Economic Forum's Global Shapers. And likewise, I think we have a lot of things also to say about Raj. I have personally worked with Raj. So, he's been in this field for so long and, his work is exemplary. So over to the two great minds in the field of SDGs. And let's carry on.
Thank you. So yes, I was just telling Johanna that I was very lucky to know Ashish from before and always been super proud of all the work that keeps happening. Ashish is definitely, if you are in the social enterprise sector, you would have met him, or you would have attended an event or attended an activity designed by him at some point or another in last 5 to 10 years. So very happy to be here with Ashish. Thank you once again from my side as well. So Ashish, to quickly get started, this is a very quick fireside chat. Why don't you give a little bit of introduction on the subject itself from your work and your insights so far, and then we could get into certain questions as well.
Sure. Thanks, Raj, and thanks for having me. And likewise, it's a very fortunate and a pleasure when they told me that you're gonna be more, doing this session. So it was good to connect after a long time, and having known you for so long, it's equally inspiring to see your work and now taking up a much larger role in terms of leading the AIC at IIT Hyderabad. So I think topic is quite interesting, and this is something that I'm personally very passionate about. How can technology, be a catalyst or accelerate the process of SDGs? So while Johanna was, introducing, she said something, people don't think about SDGs when they think about technology. It's not probably one of the first things that comes to their mind. So my sort of an alternate thought to that would be that why do we even have to look at SDGs as a something separate to the development process, or something which is very different from a day-to-day affair, right? It's a part of everything that we are doing. If you look at the 17 goals, they pretty much broadly covers a wide array of things that kind of shapes our society, that shapes our world. And I think technology is touching each of these SDGs, right? But the bigger question is not about thinking about SDGs in front. The bigger question is how do we consciously make an attempt to prioritize impact over everything else, right? And that's something that I'm quite excited about. That how do we bring conversations of impact at every aspect of what we do? So I think it'll be interesting next half an hour, 40-minute conversation. And likewise, I have my own experience and thoughts. Would be also great to hear from you, Raj, that the work that you are doing, and especially the work in Hyderabad happens to be one of the fast evolving technology hub for India. So where do you see the trends and how things have shaping up in last couple of years, and what are the future potential, what are the future opportunities for innovators and social entrepreneurs in that space, right? So I think it'll be great to have that conversation. so starting about how I look at it, I think there is so much that is happening. I was just recently reading a report by Deloitte, which published about how technology is such an important thing, especially in the when you talk about climate change, and when we talk about the accessibility of food for all. So these are some of the big areas where tech has been playing substantial role. Post COVID, I think the conversation is even a lot more relevant than ever before, because while there has been, I think the work's been impacted to a large extent, but I also look at the positive side, which is now we've been, I think, becoming more and more comfortable with the use of technology than ever before, right? So that also creates a bigger opportunity for us, right? Look at universal education, right? So education being one of the very big areas for SDGs. Accessibility through technology can definitely help uh, reach to a world. You can, sitting in India, you can go and teach probably somewhere sitting in Brazil, right? But yes, can we create that technology as even accessible to the bottom of the pyramid, right? I think these are the conversations which are gonna get more and more importance in the times now post COVID. And interestingly, we've also entered the decade of action, as it's called. So 2020 to 2030, this next 10 years defines everything that's going to happen around global goals, right? So yes, a very important time, and COVID's definitely going to bring highlight a lot of importance to the use of technology than ever before. So I think in next 30 minutes, if I think if we can come up with some clear call to actions also, because what particularly interests me is that learning is only important if people have some call to actions to that, and especially for young people who are looking to make who are looking to start up in this space, right? So yeah, those are my big thoughts on this topic.
Thanks, Ashish. So I do have few things to get back, but before that, as you said, I could also put some more context on my journey and my relationship with this two things, technology and SDGs. So at IIIT Hyderabad as well, and this took a few years to be created, and now that we have this incubation unit, we solely focus on social enterprises achieving SDGs by
Oh wow.
using technology, right?
Okay.
Now, why this? So even before the pandemic hit, we knew that the SDGs themselves were quite ambitious, and we needed that. The world needed ambitious goals in order to achieve the development that we always dreamt of. And to achieve that, there is no negotiation other than adapting technology. So we look at technology coming in three different ways to support. One is to provide the access, which you brought up, the access to things, access to services, access to products, which makes lives easier, whether right from accessing government services to accessing private services and products. You need technology, and also access helps the solutions penetrate the what we call as the bottom of the pyramid, right? A lot of people in the urban areas don't even realize the privilege of access that they have, which the SDGs talk about, that the rural and the other tier 2, tier 3 cities do not have. And hence, the use of technology in access these services. Then transformation, transform, adapt. The technologies, as we know, have made it simpler, have made some things affordable. Look at the journey of the solar industry right now. We have come a long way. There is still a long way to go. There is a lot of innovations coming up, which essentially focus on transforming the livelihoods of the poor. At some point, when it was in the initial days of solar revolutions, it used to be still a luxury, still a luxury or a premium product that people used to look up to. Now, the largest of the social enterprise efforts in solar is lighting those who don't have the lights yet, right? It's as simple as that. So transforming the way we live has been one of the biggest impact of technologies. Then lastly, I would say is the entire disruption. Now, I think at this point, it is important to acknowledge that technology by itself can neither be classified good or bad. It's a neutral element, right? It's a neutral armor that we all have. It can go either ways. We have seen massive adaptations of technologies in otherwise warfare systems, but we've also seen so much technology adoption at the social enterprise and at ensuring equitable distribution of goods. So, in that sense, hence, all the more reason that ecosystem players like you and other efforts continue to enable that, yes, the disruption happens, but the disruption for good happens. And how do we drive these conversations that side? So, at a very systemic level, we look at these as different players having different agendas in driving innovation for good. But at the end of the day, technology which drives innovation doesn't just benefit my neighborhood, it benefits the world. And hence is the close knit relationship between SDGs, and hence why it's such a huge topic between right from the governments at federal levels to the local non-profits who are implementing projects. So I think this way of looking has helped us scout for a lot of innovations and support them with mix of funding and non-funding services to help them scale their projects, and also meanwhile build an entire ecosystem of different players who provide finance, who provide mentorship, who provide advice, who provide supplementary services for these change makers in order for them to grow and scale. So this has been our experience, and we do see that a lot of these initiatives now have come to a level where they're beyond pilot as well. And obviously, as you said, the pandemic has really given a blow to a lot of these disruptions or innovations for good. But yet, I think our continued focus on understanding technology through the lens of sustainability will still drive us ahead. On that note, there is always a connection in all these things that we do. And since this is a fireside chat, I would like to also ask you your personal connection to this focus area. We are not from the valley, we are from here. And our initiatives are exactly very similar to what's happening in many advanced communities and societies in focusing on these elements. How did this happen and where did this all start? So if you can take a few minutes
Sure.
to start that, I'd be nice.
Sure, definitely. So you mean like how did Match started, or how did that
Yeah,
journey? Okay, great.
yeah.
So very interestingly, so when we started Match, it was always a very big focus on making technology more accessible to young change makers or young social entrepreneurs, and also supporting nonprofits which are facing doing some great work, but they're not able to use basic technology to best of its use, right? Which I mean, like having as simple as a basic website or having some social media presence. And I'm talking about this is way back in 2013, where things were happening. But yes, I would say I was also working, volunteering with a lot of nonprofits who were doing great work, but they were not using all of this, right? And mobile applications sort of like were booming. Everybody was second, third person you talk to in the space would talk about making a mobile app for various purposes, right? So from shopping to gaming to entertainment to even dating, there was like all kind of apps that were coming up, right? So it's but coming from the social impact, social enterprise space, you wouldn't see that many of them were happening, or probably even if they were happening, it was not probably some of the good organizations who were doing good work, but yet they were smaller, talking about using or building those platforms to create a bigger impact to its beneficiaries, right? So 2013, I had just graduated from my undergrad, and I was thinking about how to solve this problem where we create a platform for young people who wants to create, who wants to, create an impact by supporting these organizations. And on the other side, how do we build this platform for organizations to also tap into this youth talent, right? So I was in Paris, where I was part of this youth forum called UNESCO Youth Forum, and there was a particular conversation or a workshop around it was called Youth Mobile, and it was all about how can young people use mobile technology. So that was quite a eureka moment for me, because in that 1.5 hour 2 hour workshop, they had gone through a whole very simple tools and tips on how do you put an idea, put a wireframe, then create an application and start using like platforms, right? So that's when it got to me that yes, we can, it's not that complicated, and I'm not from a tech background, right? So I spoke to a friend of mine who is from a tech background. He was building these applications for he was freelancing at that time. So I shared that idea that how about we start getting these young people who wants to build these applications, and on the other side connect them with the some projects with the to support nonprofits, right? So that's how we started Mash. And first couple of I would say months, that was the pure focus around building such kind of projects and supporting nonprofits and supporting grassroots organizations. Over the time, we realized that apart from technology, there was a bigger focus on empowering more young people, youth, like I said. And I could sense there is a big dropout of people who have a deep passion about working in the impact space while they're in college, and they take it up as part of extracurriculars, but they are so heavily involved, but they're not continuing it full time. And the trend that I was noticing was primarily based on two three factors, right? One was lack of awareness, that okay, what you start, but how do you really create into a tangible project or initiative, right? Second aspect was access to like-minded people or stakeholders, mentors, so the community aspect. So the big part was, are you having access to the community who is kind of supporting you, who is kind of believing into you? And basically there was a big ecosystem that was missing. And third was making whole change making or being a social entrepreneur as aspirational as being a other non, I don't know how to say this, but being a non-social entrepreneurs are, right? Like, is it as aspirational or not? So I think so in around 2015 mid, we about 2 years into Mash, kind of pivoted into creating an ecosystem where technology remained as one of the focus areas, but we also looked at other branches of building an ecosystem for young change makers, or young social entrepreneurs. And we started doing a lot of these events where we bring community stakeholders, have dialogues with the young people, share their journeys, and kind of build these connections. And we do multiple of those events across multiple cities. That's probably, I think, I also had a chance to got to know you, and through the programs that we did in Hyderabad and other places. Second aspect is to build the skills. We are, some of us were passionate out of sheer desire to create change, jump into things without realizing whether we have whether we know about certain things, or we can, and we, I think, lose a lot of effort, time there, right? Which is also good learning process, but I think that can be saved by investing into the right kind of skills and also timely guidance, mentoring. So that's the other aspect we started doing on capacity building, and that's where we work with some of the leading trainers. Even we worked with a bunch of incubators, accelerators, to kind of do these boot camps sessions for social entrepreneurs, right? And we still continue to do a lot of them, like our own programs, or we partner with various other incubator accelerators to do that. And the third aspect on aspirational front is we heavily focus on building stories of change makers and bringing them out, right? So there are a lot of campaigns where we highlight stories of young change makers. At the same time, we also partner with various media platforms who are also like-minded and focus on impact, to create this whole awareness, at the same time making social entrepreneurship very aspirational aspect. And the great thing, Raj, that has happened, and I believe you would agree with me on that, there's a lot that has shifted also in last 5 to 7 years in a positive direction, right? Where people are being more aware. There's a lot of push by the stakeholders, institutions, governments around mainstreaming development, and that could take various forms, right? But SDGs being the bigger agenda, and like I said, it touches every aspect of what we do. What I am very excited about is that how you know multi sort of multidisciplinary it is, where we look at technology as an enabler. At the same time, we work with sort of different stakeholders to enable this, right? So there is a big focus on bringing change at a policy level. There is another aspect of financing, if you've seen, recently, especially, post COVID, there has been a lot of shift in terms of the amount of capital that is being coming to the impact focus organizations, especially in the areas of ed tech, health tech, agri tech, right? So there is a definitely upward shift, and reports have shown that some of these companies which prioritize impact, over other aspects, have performed fairly well, and also tends to attract far more funding from the investors than the other ones. So I believe it's a good time to look at impact. It's a good time to be in this space, and good time to be a social entrepreneur. At the same time, prioritize impact over everything else. Yeah. And of course, the technology can help it accelerate more than ever before. Yeah.
Yeah. So in such a diverse journey, right, Ashish, one of the things you do have a huge strength, I consider, is an ecosystem view across states, across governments, because a lot of participation from the government has also come through you, investor community for sure, and also your own participation in international forums as well. Now, in terms of that context and trends, which are the emerging sectors that you're seeing, especially last few years? And yeah, I have follow-up question on that. Does the pandemic change that impact on the emerging sectors?
Sure. In the context of India, I would say, Raj, and this is again being part of, like you said, forums, and also we closely work with some of these large entities who are, publishing reports. They're doing research. At the same time, they're also investing. So we work closely with the impact investors councils, who are every annually publishing reports which sectors performing well. Then there are part of various other forums, academic institutions. So I think top three most high potential sectors which has seen a positive shift in last couple of years, and also will continue to see that kind of growth in Indian context. Definitely clean tech. I think clean tech is a big area where people are always looking to invest into cleaner technologies, and that are kind of looking at overall environmental impact. I myself, before MASH, I have worked very closely in the waste management space. This was right before Swachh Bharat mission came in, or probably the whole idea of sanitation was very glamorized. But there has been a lot of work overall in the clean tech space, and I personally know friends who have scaled up their ventures, who are working in this space. So be it waste management, be it clean fuel, solar. I think clean tech overall tends to be even electric vehicles for that matter, right? So definitely that. Second, I think would be edtech, especially post COVID. I was just talking to another very close friend, and he's a social entrepreneur, and he's been in this space for very long. But he was telling me the amount of growth or scaling they have observed in last 3 to 4 months is something they have not seen in last 2 to 3 years, right? So adaptation is more, interest from the implementing partners agencies are more, and definitely investors are more. In fact, even if you see the just the last week, the White Hat Junior was acquired by Byju's for over $300 million, and there was less than a 2-year-old startup, right? So how often do you get to hear stories like this? And it's a good classic story of a edtech startup, right? So I think definitely edtech, and of course health tech, right? I think these three sectors will continue to be a big priority when you talk about SDGs. To your follow-up question in terms of, sorry, can you repeat that again, please?
Yeah, so because these are the emerging sectors we have seen over the last few years, especially, would the pandemic have an adverse effect on it, and how should we be
I think
prepared?
there's a positive effect on them. All
Yeah,
of them have grown, like I said, because people are now using more. Like that's why I said ed tech, health tech. So there's a
yeah,
technology behind everything, because there is less of on-ground physical sort of distribution deployment, but more of technology that is accelerating. So interestingly, I think some of the conventional, ways of doing things have shifted and changed, and they will continue to change. And people are getting more and more comfortable now, I think, getting used to things. So what's important is not just people to start up in this space or existing, but is also people who are already in this space to also innovate very quickly if they have to remain relevant, and also if they have to grow, right? So I think more than just being entrepreneurial, you need to be intrapreneurial as well, right? Where corporations are looking to also how quickly adapt to these changes. And I think there have been some very good case studies that have shifted change, but there are also negative impact also on the organizations, right? Which tells us that nothing's kind of even some of the biggest organizations. And I was, again, the report I was mentioned earlier stated that the Fortune 500 companies whose average age were used to be about 75 years, um, few years ago have now become less than 15 years in last few years. So that means the companies who are constantly becoming bigger, and they are constantly innovating and changing and adapting to the situations, right? So COVID-19 is a one sort of that big extraordinary condition that has now accelerated a lot of that growth and process, right? So that also gives us a good chance. Definitely, it's we personally have also experienced a lot of shift in the way we function, and kind of slowed down a lot of things because the programs have been on ground. But at the same time, gave us to look at things how we can alternate. Look at alternate methods of reaching out to our audience, right? And that adaptation is becoming much faster and quicker. So we are doing a lot of programs which are now gone virtual. We used to do it earlier, but we used to do it at a smaller frequency. At the bandwidth was lesser, and then for the audience that was consuming it was smaller. Now that's kind of gone up many folds. Yeah.
yeah, that makes sense. I would definitely want you to mention about the role of the government, Ashish, because you've seen across the states, you've seen obviously internationally, but even nationally, what sort of encouragement is there for social enterprises? And from the tech angle as well, right? So, because we do hear all the states always gung ho about the tech and innovation going to drive the next jobs, the next growth independently. So, have you seen this translate, and how do you think it's going ahead? What to expect from governments as well?
So Raj, I think governments, well, I will have a very broad view. Honestly, we have worked with few government agencies. Personally, I've seen some of them taking up some great initiatives also. But again, I would say the impact of that work takes time to see over a course of time, right? No doubt, governments, they would sometimes talk about a lot of things than what you would see, but definitely I've seen a positive shift working with some of the stakeholders we work with, and even talking to people who directly are working with the government. Now, because of the COVID, more and more pressure is also on the government to keep progressing on the development, right? So the good part of that is that more than ever now, it's also become a bigger need for them, right? But having said that, I think the challenge which India particularly faces, and I've seen it abroad also, we have a very complex systems of the how government functions. So what state as a policy, and the center as a policy would have, that needs to align, and also that machinery has to work faster, right? I think that those are the bottlenecks. But having said that, I think there's definitely an intent, but larger responsibilities on other actors as well, right? So public private needs to work hand in hand, but at the same time, both of them need to be very, very cohesive with each other. The good thing is that now more and more people are from private are also joining government, so there has been, it's not the way things used to be, so there is a definitely a positive shift towards the traditional approach, right? But we got to accelerate and move faster if we need to catch up on that growth, especially uh, you know since now we are looking to make it our country Atmanirbhar in all senses, right? So there is, I think, a lot needs to be done in making the process much more faster and seamless, and supporting more and more innovation and startup led growth, right? But I would like to ask that question to you, since you work with the government, I believe, very closely. So why don't you share some of your experience, and how have you seen the shift over the last couple of years?
Yes, absolutely. I was going to share that as well. And I think because of the ecosystem, more or less, we are in the same experience zone of interacting and working with the government. So far, if you look at any state government, and then it goes all the way back to the Niti Aayog and the central government, technology and emphasis on technology as a leading driver of growth for the next generation is visible. So, in terms of the visibility, the announcements, the emphasis on infrastructure and investments into that, yes, there is 100%. What interestingly, and I think you also brought it up slightly, is the access to the government. We have never before seen access to the top officials in the government asking for solutions, asking
Hmm.
for tech solutions for sustainable growth at a local level, at a ministerial levels, international. Everyone's asking for, if you have a solution that can solve the huge problems that India is facing, then yes, all ears into it, right? And there are various policy initiatives, etc., which are promoting those things. Especially, I think I wanted to break down the sustainable development goals. When we call about tech for good has been a mantra even before sustainable.
Yeah.
So what has changed, or how do we look at it right now? And this is where the government also comes in, right? Earlier to SDGs, the MDGs, the Millennium Development Goals, were
Yes.
supposed to be implemented only by the government, but the whole focus of SDGs has changed, and hence you have the 17th goal, which you also said, the partnership for goals, which essentially not just bridges northern and southern hemispheres, but also talks about the in different agencies working together, governments, private sector, non-profit sector, civil society, everyone wanting to work together, and the only way to achieve these development goals. And so hence the responsibility is not only on the government, and yet you are the face of the SDG progress. What does that lead to? The SDGs themselves, when you look at it, talks about eradication of poverty, eradication of gender inequalities, right to equal pay, sustainable ecosystem development, sustainable innovation. All these things, when you look into it, you actually see that the ideas one needs to think about in generating, in supporting, in investing are all right in front of you, are there. So if a product or a service is guaranteeing access to education, is guaranteeing, especially the digital education right now, that itself is what the SDGs are saying, that itself what the tech for good evangelists are saying all the time. And hence investment of money into such things is the only way to go ahead. So now coming to the BOP, right, the bottom of the pyramid population that we use in the social enterprise sector, we have many interventions focusing on them, yet we are to see scale. We are yet to see scale. We are yet to see many more sustainable development enterprises using technology, scaling in multiple states, and perhaps in the subcontinent as well. The bigger question in front of us is, can we have such social enterprise solutions which are going to scale beyond my city, my state, and in before 2030, and are going to impact not just Indian subcontinent but even otherwise? And I think why I say that is because that's really where you have the private capital interest. Only when you show such a scale and an ambition would the larger private capital interest take place. And in that regards, I do have that question. In terms of the various initiatives you see in these sectors that you spoke about, do we have a chance of such scaling, rapid scaling? You did talk about right now the environment being people in having more adoption of technology, but would you see the policy, the funding, the entrepreneurial spirit aligning for this kind of scale? And if you do see, where do you think one should start if one was to scale such interventions? And how do they use ecosystem support, which MASH and everybody brings together?
Right. I think that's a very important question about scaling, and that also brings me to mention that it's important to know whether, when you're building a solution, for whom you are building, right? Sometimes I know as entrepreneurs we always wanted to take it to as bigger and impact as many of lives, but one thing I've realized is that problems might be unique to a different setting, and you may need to have a very different approach to solving that particular problem. So that's where the question of whether scaling, comes or not, whether you want to scale or even not, or whether one you want to continue and go deeper into your interventions, right? So that's a between the scale and the depth. But coming back to the scale aspect, which is also very critical when you're looking about pros problems which kind of huge. SDGs are very big, ambitious goals, like you said earlier, right? So I think two, three things that I think which are very critical is um, you look at scale at the DNA of it when you're building a solution. That's something as entrepreneurs I personally have felt like you start because you see a problem, you see a particular audience, but you don't realize whether this is scalable or not, right? And over the period you keep pivoting and see whether you can scale or not. But some of the enterprises which I am aware of, and especially the tech-led, tech-focused enterprises which have scaled fairly well, and like I was telling you about this friend of mine who's run an edtech solution, and his target audience is actually low income and bottom of pyramid communities. Significantly scaled up in last couple of months since he's been in the space for quite a long time. So yeah, so the scale has to be thought through. I feel at a certain point when you're kind of looking whether the solution can be scalable to a similar kind of a demography or not, right? The second aspect which you mentioned about is that where do you kind of look at it, where do you problem start? So I think ecosystems like shaping up fairly well. There are, of course, more and more institutions and great programs. I'm sure the one that you run in Hyderabad is one such good example. There are quite a few of them, and there are a lot of private-led efforts as well coming up in the sector, right? So there, for example, companies which are looking to kind of support such initiatives, and they may, once the solutions achieved a certain scale, they ready to bring their resources, which is like established market channels, established technologies, and then you can accelerate much faster, right? A good example of that would be uh, Airbus, right? So they have this Airbus accelerator, and they are heavily investing into startups which are looking at using cleaner fuel, right? So such there are quite a lot of examples where both public and private sector support that's coming up. So you got to see like what kind of sector you are, what problem you're solving, and plug into the ecosystem as early as possible. I think that helps you to kind of tap into the resources which are available. Plus, like what I mentioned, community is very, very important for you to learn, kind of avoid making mistakes, probably, while you talk to mentors and other entrepreneurs who've already been through that similar journey, and of course leverage on the combined collective experience that's available, right? So I think that's a very important aspect of community and the ecosystem which is kind of available. Third aspect is the availability of the capital which is there, right? So like I mentioned, there's so much focus on the social finance, impact investment, blended finance, which is kind of come up quite a big way in last couple of years and continue to be there. So how can these social entrepreneurs who are creating solutions tap into those new streams of financing that's available, which also gives them benefit where they may or may not have to take the risk of diluting a lot of equity if they are if other alternate channels of funding available, which is could be a mix of a debt plus equity, or could be a grant plus equity, or could be a no equity as well. So there's a lot that's being there, where there are pay for success models that are being created, so you don't have to only look at a one traditional way of going equity. It could be a, like in our case, we are a hybrid. We're a social enterprise, started as a non-profit, we have a for-profit which looks at supporting the non-profit, and it presents a very unique solution. So when we haven't yet, but whenever if we go to a investor, can look at the both side of it, where there could be a grant which supports the non-profit elements, which kind of continues supporting a particular section, at the same time invest in the for-profit, where there is a paying capacity of the customer or the target audience, and combine that effort to build the capacity of the organization, so it becomes a lot more scalable, right? So I think, yes, those two three things are very critical when you look at scale, in terms of the problem that you're solving, for whom you're solving, and how do you structure yourself so that when you're ready to scale, you have that sort of flexibility. And I think community is a very big angle, right? And to that, I would like to also mention that there is so much that's happening. When it's happening sometime, it's also a lot of noise also, right? So it's important to cut the clutter which is there and be focused what's important to you. And the best way to do that is, I believe, to talk to few people. Whenever I found myself to be extremely, kind of confused about making some decisions or choices of what to do, there are some few people I feel very confident about going to talk to them. And at the end of the day, of course, the decision lies with you. So take like baby steps on trying some of those things. If it works, then kind of like then take bigger steps, right? If they don't, then probably look at an alternate way. And Post COVID, of course, all of us have to look at that sort of trial and testing, what works, what doesn't work, and what works, then then probably scaling that. Yeah.
Wow, thank you. You did touch upon more questions that I had already. On the stakeholders, I mean, it was really nice that you explained right from the investor point, from the startup or the social enterprise point. So most of these things, I think, are very clear on the topic that we discussed. I'm also just having a time check. It's just about 1 minute left. But I think unless you have any conclusive, and meanwhile, if any questions are there, we could take. But in conclusion, if you want to say a few things, Ashish, let's both put in certain conclusive thoughts into the session.
I think what I just said, that's very what I wanted to say is that it's important to look at the problem which you particularly feel is close to. As entrepreneurs, I think wherever we sometimes are just excited about it, but whether there's something we want to feel, we are ready to get invested for a longer duration, right? So I think it's important to identify the problem that you want to solve, because there is no dearth of opportunities for sure. And then of course plugging into the right ecosystems and having access to the right people, that's something which is very important. And I think I like to congratulate Innopark and everybody, because I think they're bringing. I was just going through the kind of people they're bringing. So these are some of the people I've personally heard and seen, and even you, Raj, for that matter. So I think to the audience, just wanted to say, while there's a lot of noise and a lot of people trying to do a lot of things, make your choices based on some of your experience and research, and have that judgment on where you pick up. There is no dearth of advice, mentoring, and also I think capital, but what kind of suits you, fits your model, and then look at that long-term growth. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Ashish, on that. It does, the picture that comes to my head while I listen to you speak is that there's so much opportunity, right? The financing for impactful projects using technology. And as we discussed, technology is neutral by itself,
Right.
and SDGs make it good. So unless you have SDGs bounded into technology, with this vast amounts of disruption happening, we have two choices. Either we're going to create the super villains of the future just using technology. When you put in SDGs, you may actually end up creating superheroes. And we're going to wait for that. On that note, back to you, Joanna.
Thank you. I really love the part. So you either become a superhero or a supervillain. Which one do you choose, right? Brilliant. I really like that. So while I wait for the audience to type in a few questions, so we have Sita as well here, the CEO of Innopark Ventures. So Sita, would you like to add anything while I just wait for the questions to come here?
Aashish, first of all, it's so lovely to see you again and reconnect. Raj, I've heard so many tremendous things about the great work that you do. It is lovely to see you. Unfortunately, I'm not able to turn on my camera, but I will. I'm sure we will all connect. Aashish, you already know how I look. It was such an insightful and informative session, and the pace at which the both of you went, even for us, when we're not thinking of SDGs every day, you've made it so relevant for all such stakeholders, right, including the investor community, as to how important for us it is for us to keep in mind when we're making investments, when we're looking at companies. And my favorite thing is to say, it should, when we're looking, even when we're looking at startups, we'll say, let's look at startups that are going to benefit people, planet, and profit, right? So the triple P, and I'm sure, I've heard this somewhere and picked it up along the way in my journey, and it stuck with me. And from the investor community, I hope, I've learned something today, and we'll keep an extra watch out to make superheroes and hopefully avoid the super villains, right? That's a promise that we can make to people like Raj and Ashish, who, have such grit and determination to make a difference and dent in the world. We applaud you for it. And thanks for today's session. Thanks, both of you, for taking the time. Ashish, are you still in Singapore? Is that Singapore air conditioner? I see. Okay, fine.
Yeah, I'm in Singapore.
All right. Thanks, and we'll connect back soon. Thanks again, both of you.
Thank you.
Session.
Thank you, Raj. Thanks, and really nice chatting with you, Raj, as well. It's a real pleasure.
Yes, always. Thank you.
Right. Great. Thank you.